Hey foodies, welcome into another video. I'm Das Food, and today I wanted to take on a bit of a hot button issue in the community, that being the concept of who the power role is. So for the longest time, it was common belief that the survivors were the power role. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this. I think there was a time where maybe I did, but I've kind of come around to thinking that maybe the killer was always kind of sort of the power role if played in a certain way, but therein like the crux of the issue. Killers had to play a very specific way to maintain the power role, and survivors were able to abuse that a lot through things like the survivor rulebook and through really grossly overpowered perks like Dead Hard. But as you probably heard, Dead Hard is gone, and it's caused quite a ruckus within the community. People are feeling a certain way about this update. And whether it's Twitter or the forums or I don't know, Reddit, or even my own streams, which by the way, das_food on Twitch, if you want to check it out. Even in my own comments in chat, I'm always hearing that, oh man, I'm just getting rolled these days. I keep getting crushed, dominated, spanked, and not in a good way. I'm getting destroyed by every killer I face who is just a camping, tunneling sweat lord, and all of my teammates keep DCing at the first sign of trouble, and I think my dog's got a bad leg, and it's raining outside, and I hate the rain, and it just goes on and on. It really seems to me like they're, and by the way, most of that's Twitter, which I understand there's some part of it that, yeah, that's just Twitter. My chat is more mild than all that, but even they have been reporting, hey, I'm getting tunneled a lot, I'm having a lot of DCs, we're getting crushed. Absolutely obliterated. And I thought, you know what? Let's apply some science to this. Let's go in and get some statistics. So what I did was I set for myself a very simple goal. I'm going to play 10 games and I'm going to track certain metrics from these games. Now, I want to address head on a couple of criticisms. One being that 10 games just isn't enough. And look, I agree. Ideally, I would have done 100 games or 1,000 games. But I do have a job outside of making Dead by Daylight content. I have a somewhat active social life. I can't just sit in front of my computer and hammer out 100 games. So I did 10 games, which by the way was already kind of a time-consuming thing because I did these with no teammates. I did not want a Swift experience. I wanted a true solo queue experience. So not only did I not bring in teammates, I did not bring perks like Kindred. I didn't bring that, I didn't bring Bond, I didn't bring anything that was going to give me a bit of an unnatural advantage in knowing where my teammates are. Another criticism might be that, oh, Food, but you play this game a lot. I mean, you stream it, you know, multiple hours a week, you make the videos, they always have B-roll footage, meaning you're playing the game a lot. And that's true. However, it needs to be noted that not all content creators are created the same in terms of skill, and I can promise you, I'm not, you know what, Ots, right? Like, I'm not Otstarva, I'm not Noob3, I'm not one of these people who can just go on and absolutely crush baby killers. No, I'm actually pretty bad at the game. In fact, embarrassingly so for the amount of time I put in. Again, just stop by one of my streams, I promise, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm not very good at this game, so I don't really buy into that one. Obviously, I have some game knowledge because I've played long enough, but I don't think that this was anything too crazy. And then lastly, there are going to be people who probably say, oh, but he's cherry picking. He's cherry picking certain games to fit his agenda. And that one is actually pretty easy to disprove. All you really need to do as an internet sleuth is check out my ranks at the end of every game, and you'll see that they're remotely the same. In fact, I only had 2 games I recorded that I did not end up counting towards the statistics. One of them was a game where somebody disconnected while loading in, so obviously that wouldn't have been very genuine to put that we all escaped, even though I guess technically we did. And then another one was against a trickster on the Eyrie of Crows, and we were with a streamer, which I'm glad it was a streamer because I was able to go to their stream and see that while everybody else was playing, they were fiddling with their microphone. They never once played the game, and all of a sudden they look and they're like, oh crap, I'm on the hook, and they DC. So that one didn't really feel like a true DBD experience to me. Maybe you think I should have counted that one, but for me personally, that teammate never played the game. It's not like they were playing, they got downed and they DC'd. They never once moved their character. All they did was load in, mess around with their microphone, and then disconnect. Because I don't think they intended to load into this game, but I'm not certain. So all of that to say, those are the things I want to get out of the way. Let's get into talking about my criteria. So First, I charted which killers I face, because if you listen to some people, all you face these days are going to be Blight, Nurse, Spirit, and I don't know, some other high tier killer. Not exactly what I found, but we'll get into that as we go. Next, did I survive? Because, you know, that's the thing I have the most control over. Not total control over, but that's what I have the most control over. Then I wanted to look at total survivals. How many survivors made it out of each trial? Because obviously, me surviving could just be me finding the hatch. I could play selfishly, find the hatch, yada yada. So, how many people survived in total? How many gens were completed? That's a big one I hear a lot about. Oh, ever since they buffed or nerfed, depending on how you want to look at it, the time it takes to do gens and improved perks like Thanatophobia, it's just impossible to do gens. Next, was there a hard tunnel or a face camp? I am not interested in somebody who maybe kind of lightly played a little bit sort of kind of resembling tunneling. No, I'm talking about undeniable. This is a tunnel, this is a camp, which by the way, those are fine. You're allowed to do those, but I'm allowed to record if you do those because those greatly change the dynamic of the game. Next, I recorded what map each game was played on because some people think the map is super important. I would actually argue it's way more important for the killer than it is for the survivor, but I recorded it all the same so that you can try to tell me, look, if I got nothing but the game, sure, then you could say that, okay, well, maybe I got super lucky, but I didn't. Next, was there a DC? And that was one that obviously, again, I hear so much about this. Oh, it's just so many DCs now. People just keep DCing. Well, let's record. Let's see how that goes. Oh, and then lastly, one more thing. I tried really hard not to do anything overpowered, right? So I did not bring any brand new toolboxes or brand new parts for a toolbox. I did not bring any add-on of a rarity greater than common. And the only time I brought add-ons was I was doing a tome where I had to sabo hooks and one where or a tome and a daily somehow, where one was having to sabo hooks and one was having to deplete toolboxes. So that's the only thing I ever brought. In terms of offerings, only blood point related ones. I never once brought one to send us to a specific realm. So through 10 games, what did I find? Let's get into it and start with game 1. Game 1 was one of the most fun of the bunch. It was against a Deathslinger on Larry's Memorial, and honestly, it was a pretty good time. There were a lot of close calls, and not everybody made it out. One of us did die. We got all 5 gens done, and there was no hard tunnel or camp, and nobody DC'd. So overall, this was a very fun one, and I gotta be honest, trying to get out of the exit gate as the slinger, tries to spear you from a distance is pretty terrifying. I'll also go on and let you know that this is the only Deathslinger we saw for the entire time, which was kind of a shame, but I had fun. I wish I could say I only saw the next killer once, but I would be lying to you. Game 2 was the first of a few Blight games, and it was easily the most fun. Not just because I survived, which I did, and not just because the Blight was dressed in his new ooey gooey purple outfit, which was actually really cool to see on such a dark map, but it was just a very fun game, and usually you don't expect to have much fun against an infectious fright Blight. That's not easy to say back to back like that, but it actually ended up being a challenging but pretty fun game where all 4 of us ended up escaping, all 5 gens were done, there was no camping, no tunneling. It was on RPD, so you gotta give the Blight some credit there. That's not an easy map for anybody, and nobody DC'd, so overall, very positive experience. I was riding high going into game 3. Through 2 games, we had 7 of 8 possible survivors escape, and 10 of 10 possible gens get finished. No DCs, no camps, no tunnels, and actually pretty good maps for survivors. It would quickly turn around as we faced a Sadako who, to put it politely, wrecked our shit. It was not a very good game on my part. I played like dog water, and you're going to hear at one point I'm going to criticize some teammates. and it needs to be understood that I'm not always playing very well myself. So this was a bad showing for me. Now, I will say that for the 0 survivors that actually made it out, it should have been 1, but the Kate decided to stick around despite the exit gates being opened and despite me being on death hook. I don't know what she was waiting for, but she got blood wardened. You know, I mean, I guess part of me that knew I was like tracking these stats, I was like, ah, man, that's going to influence the stats. That's kind of almost an artificial influence, but I'm sure it was super fun for the Sadako, so I'm okay with it. This one was played on the Ironworks of Misery, which I consider to be a generally survivor-sided map, and you know what? We didn't do so well. We did not take advantage of that, so that was a super frustrating one. I think this was a good example of a game where we're trying and we're trying and we're trying and it's just not working. It's just not working out for us. I will say though, let me check my notes here and make sure. Yeah, okay, so I had some very harsh words in this one. I thought that the Dwight and the Kate were rather bad. You can watch the B-roll and see for yourself to some extent, but especially anytime I would get put on a hook and see what they were doing, it was just distressing to see that this is what I was working with. But overall, yes, that was our first really painful one. That was our first really bad showing of the day. Next, we went against a Wraith on Larry's, and I considered not counting this one, but I decided it was actually fair to count it because I would have counted the game if a survivor had DC'd after their first down, because, you know, that's one thing we were looking for. So I think a killer DC is equally valid. And basically, whereas I played really poorly against the Sadako, I played well enough against the Wraith that I think I was a factor in him DCing, though I didn't do anything toxic. I just looped, so unless you think looping is toxic, but we'll go on and count that one, though it does kind of skew the stats a little, and I realize that. We'll say 4 survivors escaped, 5 gens complete. No camping or tunneling, obviously. I don't think anyone got hooked the entire game. But there was a DC, this time being the killer, which is a first and a last for this. Next, we moved to Game 5, and in Game 5, we faced a Legion, and this one was a bit of a rough game. So, this is the first time that we have not popped all the gens. We only got 4 done, which, admittedly, 4 is not terrible, but it's not great either. What's really not great is only 1 survivor making it out, that being me. Now, granted, if I could only pick one, I'm a selfish bastard, so I say, why not me? But I made it out through the hatch. That's just a matter of luck. That's not a matter of skill. Thankfully, there was no camping or tunneling. This was also on the Ironworks of Misery. So far, that map is living up to its name because the only 2 times we've gotten stomped have been on the Ironworks. No DCs. Overall, pretty fun game. Given that Jeff was already dripped out and had gone through 5 games already, I thought it was time to call in a sheriff. So we brought Kate to town to take on the next task. Kate was faced with a trapper, and it was actually a pretty close game, but it shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been a close game, but my teammates, and again, I'm not trying to be the guy that always blames his teammates, like, oh, content creator thinks his teammates are bad. Go figure. But my teammates almost turned it into a 4K. They almost snatched defeat from the jaws of victory by being overly altruistic. It was painful to watch, but luckily we were able to rally to some extent and get 2 survivors out of there, one of them being me, the other being a Michaela. We popped all 5 gens, no camping, no tunneling, no DCs, and this one was on Haddonfield, which I don't know if people consider that a killer or survivor map, but you know, I think it's big enough to be a survivor map, but it has enough dead spaces to be a killer map. So overall, this was a fun one. I had a good time with this. I wish I saw more trappers. Game 7 was a bit of a reckoning for me. I have been very mean to Freddy over the years. Very, very mean. Nasty, really. I mean, just compare how long I roasted him in the Roasting Every Killer video to how long I roasted literally anybody else. Obviously, Fredster and I, we do not necessarily get along. It's like oil and water with fire. But this was Freddy's chance to get some payback, and he did it on the game, which is a very survivor-sided map if I've ever seen one. However, this was the first hard tunnel we saw, where Freddy decided Leon was going to go, and once Leon was out, things just got a little painful from there. We did get 4 gens completed, and nobody DC'd, so there are positives to take out of that, but only 1 survivor escaped, and that was through the hatch. That survivor, by the way, was not me, because Freddy would never let me live. I have said too much, so I guess that's fair. All the way in game 8 out of 10, we get our first repeat killer of the list, that being the Blight. The Blight came back around for another go. However, I didn't find this one to be as fun as the first Blight. The first Blight was good enough to keep me on my toes, but not good enough to really threaten me. However, this Blight was more than good enough to threaten me, and in fact, he did kill me, so, well played, Blight. Again, this is back-to-back where I didn't survive, and 1 survivor did make it out through the hatch. This was also another one where we didn't pop all 5 gens, this one being our worst performance of the entire outing, only 3 gens going down. No camping, no tunneling, no DCs, and again, it was another one on the game, so back-to-back Gideon meat plant maps. Kind of interesting there, but yeah, did not go super well for us. Thankfully, we were done with the Blight forever and ever. I may have spoken too soon. Game 9, we get a corn map, and not just any corn map, Rotten Fields, which, I mean, at least it wasn't a hillbilly or Oni, I guess. But Blight can be pretty spooky on Rotten Fields. And again, we got the Blight. That is our 3rd time with the Blight. This is his final appearance on this, but there's only 1 more game, so I mean, I guess it couldn't have been that many more. And again, I didn't survive. Again, I was murdered by the Blight. It was painful. I did not enjoy it. What is funny is there was a missed flashlight save that my teammate apologized for. But in that instance, I don't blame them at all, because I can't hit flashlight saves. So it'd be rather hypocritical of me to expect them to save me when I can't hit them. We did get all 5 gens completed. We got 2 survivors out. Both of them clicky-clickied and teabagged at the gates so that they could assert their dominance. That was not my favorite thing to see. No camping, no tunneling, no DCs. And again, it was Rotten Fields, which I actually consider to be one of the killer-sided maps, but I know some killers hate it. So, let me know down below, how do you feel about Rotten Fields? Is it a killer or survivor-sided map? And finally, we got to game 10. However, the sheriff was all tuckered out, her dogs were barking, and she needed to go put them up. So we called in everybody's favorite penguin, Zarina Kassir. Zarina came in and faced a Pyramid Head, which was the first time we saw Pyramid Head during this experiment, and honestly, I was pretty excited about it. I was happy to see a Pyramid Head. This was easily the most fun game of the 10. I am so excited that this ended up being the final game because it was a blast. The only real regret I have with it is that I only got what I would consider to be 1, maybe 2 loops in with Pyramid Head myself. However, what they lacked in quantity, they made up for in quality. To get some of the numbers out of the way, we got 5 gens completed, no camping, no tunneling, no DCs. It was on Azarov's resting place, but did we all make it out? Well, let me tell you. Firstly, I made a massive mistake and accidentally opened the gate when I didn't mean to. To say I wasn't paying attention would be kind of fair. But this set the scene for something really exciting, where 2 survivors were forced out of the game. Not dead, but just forced out, while Meg was brought to the other side of the map by, what do you call it? When, he sticks his knife into the ground and they teleport to a cage of atonement or whatever. And it was all the way on the other side of the map, and we didn't have a lot of time. So it felt to me like the Halo 3 Warthog run. I go over, I get her out of the cage, and all of a sudden, boom, there's Triangle Face, Dorito Noggin, and he's mad. So he chases us, and we have to run across the entire map. It is the most intense thing. I did not think we were going to make it, but luckily we did. And honestly, it's one of the most fun things I've had in this game in a long time. So overall, that was a pretty solid one to end on. Now, let's go into the numbers a little bit here. And I feel like James A. Denise. Let's get to the numbers. But, okay, so in terms of talking about generators being done, would you believe it if I told you, and you can go back, you can check the footage on this, through 10 games, we averaged 4.6 generators being done. That's out of 5. So for all the talks that gens just aren't getting done, I'm a little unsympathetic to that. I did not find that to be the case at all. Even in the games where we generally got stomped, we still got gens done. As far as survivors making it out or not, we averaged 2.2 survivals per game, which, again, honestly, that's kind of perfect, isn't it? I mean, for survivors, if you average 2 escaping a game, that means you're having a lot of games that are generally pretty close. Now, I want to acknowledge that because a couple of killers, I think 3 of them, gave hatch, that does inflate the numbers a little bit, but not by a drastic margin. As far as me personally surviving, I was pretty happy. I made it out 6 out of the 10 games, which for a guy like me who's not a very good player, that's pretty nice. We did not face many repeat killers. We faced 3 blights, but no nurses, no huntress, no spirit. I mean, it was odd. I was very surprised by that. I was surprised that we faced a trapper and a Freddy and a deathslinger and a Sadako, but not a huntress, not a spirit, not a nurse. Yeah, very odd there. But what is to be taken away from all of this? What is the conclusion? To me, and it's going to sound harsh, this is not going to be my nicest moment, but some of you need to get good. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to say that as some, oh, epic, I owned you, I told you to get good, but some of the people complaining about how they just can't win without Dead Hard and the extra 10 seconds on generator time is just unreal. I'm not seeing it. Now, it should be noted, I am not actually in iridescent ranks right now, but you know, I mean, you face killers on a pretty sliding scale. Some are going to be better than others, no matter your rank. And maybe it would have been a thing that if I had been iridescent rank 1, I would have faced nothing but highly meta killers who play as sweaty as possible. I am willing to admit that. But I also think other people should be willing to admit that maybe the game's not as broken as it's being made out to be. Maybe it just got a little harder for survivors. Maybe it's not worth threatening walkouts over and, oh, I will quit. The devs are killer-sided and all of this. Really, this felt like a great snap back. Because for years, it had been a situation where every time there was an update, it was like, it's a little survivor-sided. It's a little survivor-sided. Oh, this one's very survivor-sided. Survivor. This felt like them snapping it back to try to give killers a little more viability. And I think the main thing to preach here is patience. Get used to the new meta. See how you feel about it. Because some things aren't good, but you're used to them, and therefore you think they are good. And a good example of that would be Nurse. Nurse has been in the game so long, a lot of people don't even question just how broken she is. It's just part of it. The same went for Dead Hard for a really long time. It was super broken and super unhealthy for the game, but people were like, well, it's been around forever, so I guess we got to keep it. And I don't think that's especially great either. So I would just preach patience, and I would say, you know, go in, do this yourself. Let me know the results. Play 10 games, let me know the numbers, and tell me, did they vary? Are they different? And if so, why do you think they're different? You know, because some people I play with, I'll see them, they'll clicky, they'll teabag, and then they'll be like, oh, why did I get tunneled? And it's like, yeah, I wonder why you got tunneled. So just be aware of that. Look out for it. And I hope that this was in some way interesting. I hope it was in some way maybe enlightening for you. I had fun doing it though, so I'd be interested to do more experiments like this in the future. But until then, I've been undisputed. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my